It's a pleasure to be on this stage today. I'd like to talk about African entrepreneurship. I'd like to share an idea I have, an idea I think if embraced by enough people will change the nature of entrepreneurship in Africa and hopefully entrepreneurship in other emerging markets. So to give my story some context, I'd like to start with my own sort of personal story. I grew up in eastern Nigeria. I went to a boarding school at King's College, just a few miles from the stage. I ended up going to school in the United States, and I worked mostly in investment banking and also as an entrepreneur in New York. So I came back in 2009 to invest in African businesses, and this is what we wanted to invest in. We wanted to invest in food in West Africa. West Africa has a population of 300 million people, and we consume roughly $75 billion worth of food each year. So the goal was not only to make money, but also to participate in the African story and the African Renaissance and provide jobs and employment for Africans. And this is what we wanted to invest in. We wanted to invest in the food value chain in Africa, in West Africa. And this was basically all the steps that go towards making food, right, from the farm all the way to the consumer's plate. So processing of food, packaging of food, etc. So a few months after I moved back to actually Nigeria, I got introduced to a Ghanaian businessman who invited me to Kumasi, which is a town, a city in the center of Ghana, to take a look at his soy processing factory. And this is what I saw when I came to see his factory. You don't see it very well here, but it's a poorly laid out factory, bad equipment. He didn't really think through his working capital, etc. He didn't have enough information to figure out what exactly his market was going to be. And also, he didn't have any sort of information and management systems to run his business properly. For those of us who are interested in investing in businesses, this is a very typical story of African entrepreneurs. So over lunch, he basically recounted the trials and tribulations of starting a business in Africa. He talked about how he had ordered this equipment from China. It didn't actually produce the right kind of soy, vegetables, oil that he needed in the market, and it was basically a moribund business, and he was looking for capital to restart the business. We didn't end up investing in the business, but his story is still remarkable, to the extent that given the few resources he had and the few access to expertise, he was able to get as far as he did. So, but why is this particular story important? I think it's important because small businesses are key to employment and economic growth. So in the United States, for example, 50%, literally half of people employed in the private sector are employed by small businesses. So for Africa to continue growing economically and to employ our citizens in each individual country, we need to figure out how to grow and nurture small businesses and small entrepreneurs. So that's a particularly new observation that we need to help small businesses. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem of NGOs, non-for-profits. So I don't think that approach works, and I'll tell you why I don't think it works. So most people don't know this, but you can actually put the entire United States, China, India, Eastern Europe, most of Western Europe into the actual continent of Africa. So to think that you'll be able to send enough consultants, business analysts to Kampala, Kigali, Cairo, Dakar, Jos to actually make an impact in entrepreneurship in Africa, I think is crazy. So I think a new approach towards promoting African entrepreneurship is required, and that's the idea I'd like to share with you today. Before I do that, I want to quickly talk about my own personal story about starting the first company I started in the United States, because I think it gives you a sense of why I think this is a potential idea that could work. So the first idea I started was a company called Hopstop.com. And when I started it, I had no technical skills, and I actually had to find developers to build the site. And I went to several online websites and marketplaces for talent. And I found a Ukrainian developer, I found a Russian developer, I found a Brazilian voice XML technologist. I found a data team in India. So the point here is, though, that location isn't key anymore. With the technologies, with the internet, and with the collaboration technologies, location, you can, as an entrepreneur, you can tap into expertise that's not within your physical location. I think that's a very important point. So here's my idea, here's my contribution to kind of the discussion around African entrepreneurship. So the concept I have is this, essentially a wiki type project where you basically have this community of technical expertise provided by architects, engineers, information experts, accountants, and that information and those experts collaborate, again, entirely on the web, and then essentially commoditize the business plan, then operating plan for small businesses in Africa. If you think about it, right, people talk about recycling, but in countless cities, in countless projects, people are essentially recreating the wheel each single time. Africa, in West Africa, for example, 50% of the fruits produced go to waste each year. 30% of the grains spoil because there's no storage and processing of those fruits. And in every single country, entrepreneurs are figuring out a way how to set up factories to process that fruit. There's no reason why every entrepreneur should have to do this every single time in all the different countries in Africa. So my idea is to essentially commoditize that process and have one place where a budding entrepreneur in Ghana or in Uganda can go and actually access basically a template for starting a business. All the operating plans, all the business plan, all the information, all they have to do is customize it for their own particular situation. So essentially the idea is really a business in a box. That's kind of the easiest way for me to describe the idea behind this. Essentially, if you lived in Jos, for example, and there were lots of tomatoes, you can actually go and download how to set up a factory to do tomato processing. If you lived in a place that had lots of mangoes, you could figure out how to create a small business to do juice processing. But that's a pretty simple concept. But if you step back and think about it, and even people within this room, with all your degrees and all the knowledge you have, how do you actually start a processing business? It's incredibly difficult for people who don't have the expertise to do so. So let's go back to the Ghanaian entrepreneur I met a few years ago. So let's just imagine that this site actually existed. What would happen? He would go to the website, he'll look for businesses relating to soy processing, and he'll download maybe a market share information provided by maybe USAID, get information around the amount of imports provided by the Ghana Customs Board, for example, around vegetable oil. And perhaps an American architect would submit, provide a sample layout for a well-designed factory. He will also be able to hopefully tap into the knowledge maybe of a retired Spanish process engineer who can tell him exactly what kinds of equipment he needs. And maybe a Nigerian business consultant will give him a model template to do a financial model so he can go and potentially raise money from a bank. But it seems like a simple, pretty concept. But if the entrepreneur I had met a few years ago had this, I'm sure his story will be a very different story. So take this story and multiply it by the thousands of entrepreneurs all over Africa who are really trying to start a business. How many of you here could start a chicken farm, successful chicken farm? What kind of information do you need? There is an incredible amount of information that's missing and technical information to make these businesses successful. So the question is, why do I think this will work? And I think it can. And if you look at a couple of other projects that have relied on open source or crowdsourcing systems like Wikipedia, very popular encyclopedia, generated entirely by people like us, Drupal, MySQL, Linux, Firefox, these are all examples of projects powered by passion of the community. And I think if enough people who believe in a concept like this, we can make this a reality. So, the kind of action point for us is our firm, Constant Capital, wants to start a foundation to do exactly this project. Essentially, and what we're looking for are equally passionate people about promoting entrepreneurs in Africa to come on board and help create this foundation. So it's going to be modeled around the sort of Wikipedia or Wikimedia Foundation, and basically create a foundation to allow this project to be built and for entrepreneurs to take advantage of this information and really access the global community of experts out there. Okay, so this is a quote I got from John Lennon, not particularly, I don't think he's a businessman, but I think it's critical, it's very important to think this way, where just like every other Wikipedia and every other concept out there, all it takes is for believers in a particular concept to make it happen. So that's my presentation. I hope you email me. Thank you.